Well, good morning and welcome to the Premier Stampede Breakfast. We are so excited to be back here welcoming Albertans and people from across Canada to the greatest outdoor show on earth. We're proud to be hosting the first major event in Canada. With the Stampede, as we emerge from the pandemic, I want to thank Albertans for their diligence in stepping up and getting vaccinated over the past few months. Because of that, we've been able to open for summer, and I believe based on everything we know about COVID-19, we can be open for good. We need to keep pushing up those vaccine numbers and just using common sense. But it is so great to see people out and about, recreating community, reconnecting with friends and people they haven't seen for over a year. And I am proud that Alberta is leading Canada out of the pandemic and leading Canada in economic growth. Our government, now that we move forward, is going to be able to get focused back on what people elected us to do, to create jobs, grow the economy, get pipelines built, and fight for a fair deal for Alberta. But for the rest of the Stampede, we're going to have a great time reconnecting with Calgarians and Albertans as we celebrate our rural roots and our Western heritage. With that, I'm happy to take your questions.
Premier, will you be a campaign here for O'Toole next election?
Possibly. I had dinner with Aaron O'Toole here in Calgary during his visit past few days, and obviously wish him well. And if I can play a helpful role, I will do so. It's no secret that I believe Alberta would be better served with a different federal government, one that will actually champion resource jobs and our energy industry and will respect the provinces. Obviously, we have to find a way to work productively with whoever is in office in Ottawa. We've tried to do that, especially during the pandemic. But whenever that federal election comes around, I'll be making the case for a pro-jobs federal government that respects the West, respects Alberta, and respects the energy sector. Well, I think I got assurances that they continue to be committed to completion of the Trans Mountain pipeline expansion, which is essential for Alberta's economic future. So there are issues on which we see eye to eye and have common ground. Obviously, TMX is one of those, and we also agree to work together in overcoming the Governor of Michigan's effort to shut down the safe operation of the Line 5 pipeline that ships 600,000 barrels of Alberta oil to up the upper Midwest and central Canada every single day. So there are points on that where we agree, but I also underscored that we are going to continue our lawsuit against his government's intrusion into our jurisdiction over the No More Pipelines Law, Bill C-69, that we ask him to hold open the 2 Senate vacancies until Albertans can elect their senators this fall, and of course that we will be proceeding with our referendum on equalization.
Number of anti-vaccine protesters out there. What are your plans for what we can do to get the 20% odd that just aren't?
So, yeah, it's unfortunate that we have a loud but very small minority who are spreading misinformation about the safety of vaccines. Let me be clear about this. And these people are trying to I think, spread fear and misinformation that could ultimately cost lives. In Alberta, we've administered well over 4 million doses, and we've only had about 700 reported adverse outcomes from the COVID-19 vaccines, most of which are very minor. We've had one death. Every death is tragic, but one death from a vaccine adverse outcome as opposed to 2,400 COVID-19 deaths. So I would just ask Albertans to follow reliable scientific sources of information when it comes to the vaccines. We are now at 80% of Calgarians having had at least one dose. 61% of Calgarians have had at least a second dose. Province-wide, we're at 74% first dose and 54% second dose. So we are certainly getting there. I believe you'll see the numbers continue to creep up over the summer. We now are putting on our ground game. So I think, you know what, there's probably 10% that will not get vaccinated under any circumstances for whatever reason. But we think we can hit 80%. It's going to take a little bit of while. We think that the people who are most likely to get vaccinated but who have not yet done so tend to be younger working adults between about 20 and 40, and they're just busy. They're healthy. They probably don't have a family doctor. and they don't have much of a connection to the healthcare system, we're going to reach out to them in a very concentrated way.
What's your position on vaccine passports for those individuals unwilling to be vaccinated?
Opposed, and we've been very clear from the beginning that we will not facilitate or accept vaccine passports, and that in fact we regard, I believe that they would in principle contravene the Health Information Act and also possibly the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. We also amended the Public Health Act to remove the 110-year-old power allowing Alberta to force people to be inoculated. So these folks who are concerned about mandatory vaccines have nothing to be concerned about, and there will be no vaccine passports in Alberta.
And will the provincial government act on behalf of Alberta's citizens if the federal government seeks to impose such restrictions?
Yes.
When would you like the border to open, and what are you actually doing to push the feds to make that happen sooner rather than later?
Well, this was the first issue I raised with the Prime Minister on Tuesday, our desire to see those borders open for safe travel as soon as possible. And I've been leading that charge amongst the premiers for months now. We're saying that right now, any foreign national who has been fully vaccinated and can have proof of a negative test should be admitted without quarantine, because scientifically the chances of them transmitting are statistically insignificant. So we should follow the science, not politicize this. We have 800,000 Canadians who work in the travel and tourism industries. We need to get them back to work. We need WestJet back in the skies for Alberta's economic future. We need all the people who work in Alberta's tourism industry back to work. And we can do that safely. European countries, other countries are following this protocol. If you're fully vaccinated and you have a negative test, we believe you should be welcome to Canada. Now, myself, the premiers of Ontario, Quebec, and BC have written to the Prime Minister saying exactly that last week, and we will be forcefully making that point at the Forum of First Ministers meeting this coming Thursday. And the Prime Minister sounded flexible to me. He sounded open to our argument, so I hope we can make progress next week.
And the date you want to have open?
Well, our letter said July 22nd, but I'll take any as soon as I can.
Premier, you had a disappointing jobs report on Friday. What's your reaction to it, and what is it going to take to get some of the private sector jobs created?
Well, I was a bit surprised because with all the reopening going on, we expected to see more of a surge in employment in the service industry. I'm sure we'll see that in July with the full opening here. And look, as you know, last week, yet another bank, CIBC, confirmed that Alberta is leading Canada in economic growth. I think they projected 7.4% expansion of our economy this year and large job creation. So we're in a bit of a transition time as we exit the pandemic and get life back to normal. But I believe in the latter half of this year, you're going to see huge job growth in Alberta. And here's the cool thing. Not only have commodity prices come back strong, oil and gas, forestry, agriculture doing well, but we have a record year in venture capital, tech, digital startups. We have new industries coming here like hydrogen. We have we've got huge capital projects going on. We're supporting that with $8 billion a year in capital spending. So we're going to see strong employment growth once we get fully past the pandemic.
So, boss, what's your plan, your government's plan to bring more people to move from other part of Canada to Alberta?
Thank you. That's a good question. So I believe that a year from now, the number one issue we'll be facing in Alberta is labor and skill shortages with very strong economic growth. And so we will be bringing legislation in this fall to the legislature to require that the licensing bodies for trades and professions recognize the credentials from all other Canadian provinces and do that automatically, like in the European Union. If you are a plumber in Ontario or a doctor in BC and you want to move to Alberta, our legislation will require that they recognize your credentials as long as they are a similar scope of practice and as long as you register with the body. So we will be, just as we are the most free trade province in Canada, we will be the most open to the skills of other Canadians. Also, Minister Yassine will be bringing forward the Alberta Advantage Immigration Strategy later this summer to reform the Alberta Immigrant Nominee Program to bring skilled folks here who can start businesses especially and create jobs in Alberta. Oh, hi, Don.
The hotel tax. There was a news conference yesterday, and the executive director of the Calgary Hotels Association asked you to continue foregoing the tax. What's the NDP no less?
Well, obviously the hotel industry has been hit hard, Don, and we recognize that, which is why we have given them huge support by letting them keep the tourism levy. We've also increased the budget for Tourism Alberta by $23 million for each of the next 3 years to help out hotels. We've also let them keep half of the WCB premiums that they would normally be collected. We abated fees and provided other support, including participating with the federal commercial rent assistance program. And so we provided the hotels and other businesses with enormous support, including the small and medium-sized enterprise grant, which has been over $1 billion of direct financial support to Alberta businesses. We'll take a look at that. We think the best thing, though, is for the feds to open the borders so we can fill up these hotels. Until that happens, they're going to be struggling, unfortunately.
Premier, can you say about the staff shortages of the hospitals that we're seeing and what the province is doing to address that?
Well, I know AHS is working on that. We have more doctors working in Alberta now than we've ever had in our history. We have the highest healthcare budget in Alberta history. And we are further increasing it in this year's budget to reduce our surgical wait times. And there's always a bit of a challenge, though, in rural and remote hospitals. That's not a new thing, and it's not just an Alberta thing. And that's why we've increased by $90 million the budget for physician recruitment and retention in rural hospitals. So, but some of those hospitals, they only have a few physicians attached to them, and when people go on summer holiday and we don't have a locum pool that's strong enough, then that's large enough, then some of those hospitals are hard stretched. So AHS is working on that, and I know Minister Shandro could follow up with a more detailed answer. Folks, with that, I'm going to go out and meet people en français.
Dossiers en attente, le charbon, le programme scolaire, la santé, les infirmières, le manque de personnel. Est-ce que vous allez adresser ces questions-là cet été ou juste faire le tour et les sourires?
Non, écoutez, nous continuons de s'adresser aux questions importantes comme gouvernement, mais on peut avoir un grand événement communautaire comme Stampede en même temps. On a augmenté le budget pour la santé et particulièrement pour les hôpitaux ruraux avec une augmentation de 70 millions de dollars pour recruter plus de médecins pour ces hôpitaux-là. Puis, mais le truc sur lequel nous sommes axés, c'est la croissance économique. Pendant que nous sortons la crise de la pandémie, il faut que nous relancer l'économie. Ça, c'est notre but central comme gouvernement. Thanks very much, everyone.
So I just wanted to ask about the stories over the weekend about the shortages at the Royal Alec and some of the hospitals and sort of what's being done to address those problems.
Well, yeah, I mean, we know that this is, as we came out of COVID, we were still going to have pressures in our hospital system with AHS and Covenant, and it's going to be throughout July and August as it's a number of issues as we see increased retirement, coming out of COVID. We're going to see increased pressures for all of our health professions. So AHS has been expecting this. They've been planning along with Covenant to be able to make sure that the pressure in the summer is going to be addressed through AHS. They know as well from us, same as it's been throughout COVID, that resources are not going to be an issue, as they make sure that the primary focus for us is lives, right? For people going to be able to get the care that they need throughout the province throughout the summer, as we knew that this shortage was going to happen.
So with this shortage, how hard is it to recruit more staff given the ongoing negotiations and talk about collapse?
Well, look, I think we've made throughout Alberta, I'll say this. AHS is right now sitting with through the mandates that have been provided by the Minister of Finance. They're sitting down with the unions to be able to negotiate. I see it as a separate issue. They are going to continue to make sure they're recruiting all health professions, especially in our rural facilities where we do have those increased pressures as well as the major urbans. So, but again, we told AHS when it comes to recruiting and retention, especially throughout the summer months, this is the same as COVID. Resources are an issue. Thanks.
On the note of enforcement, we're seeing COVID restrictions drop and we're starting to move beyond it, but there are certain people still facing the risk of jail time. Has there been targeted enforcement? Do you care to comment on that at all?
Well, look, enforcement is up to the enforcement agencies, and for somebody who's received a ticket or whatever else has happened throughout COVID, that's really up to the prosecutors at this time to make those decisions on whether something is dropped or whether it continues to be proceeded. Government does not interfere, despite the misinformation that people have heard throughout the pandemic. Government does not make directions about enforcement. That's left to enforcement agencies.
So reports that you indicated certain individuals as high target offenders to be targeted, you're denying those?
Yes, I have not done that. No, that's misinformation.
Okay, so you're saying that's categorically not true?
I have not directed enforcement against people. No, that is not up to government to do that. That is why we keep enforcement arm's length and allow that to be done by enforcement agencies, whether it's AHS or our police services. And then once there is, if there is a ticket or there is a charge, it's up to the prosecutors at that point.
And do you agree just personally with jail terms of 2 years, 4 years, 21 days for first-time offenders? Do you think that's proportionate?
I'm not going to speak to anything that's in front of the courts right now.
People might be a bit surprised from other parts of the country of this event with no one's masked, no social distancing, sharing food. What would you say to other parts of the country that might be kind of surprised by people being all together without masks?
Well, look, I understand all throughout the world that people still have apprehension. We will continue to follow the science that once we're now over, in Calgary especially, we're over 80% first dose vaccination. And especially when we get to over 65% second dose vaccination and moving into that recovery stage and the full transition of going from pandemic response to endemic response, eventually the rest of the world is also going to have to be moving to an endemic response and easing restrictions, but also moving on with treating this as a communicable disease that is something that is treated by a vaccine. So, that's something that I'm proud for Alberta to be able to show the rest of the country is how something that can be safely done. In Stampede, first major event, we did expect that would be the case, but I think it's a great first major event for the country to be able to see.